everybody. Welcome back to the Human Perspective. Today, we are going to be talking with Bethany Stevens, and I think it's going to be an exciting discussion. So, Bethany, could you please tell us what it means to be a sexologist and a disability consultant?
Absolutely. Thank you, Judy, for having me with you. It is quite an opportunity to be with you and share your time. So I actually identify as a sexpert. I've changed it from sexologist. So really just to get to the idea that I'm an expert on sexuality. Sexologist tends to be a little too big of a word for people to understand. And they might think I'm in a medical field. And really, I've spent the last about decade or more than a decade, studying sexuality. So I have a master's degree in sexuality. I worked under former Surgeon General, Dr. David Satcher, studying sexual health. He's the only Surgeon General who wrote a report on sexual health. So I have extensive training and knowledge in sexuality, and I also did my degree in sexuality studies in San Francisco before the tech boom happened. So it was still very sexual and very, very gay. Not that it's not gay now, but it was an explosion for my little eyes from Florida. So I both got the education and the holistic feast of the eyes, mind, the soul in San Francisco of sexuality. So that's what that means. And with regard to disability consulting, I consult with organizations, conferences usually that come to Atlanta where I live, and talk to them about access maps for their conferences. I also consult with organizations about how to deal with ableism. Recently, an example of that is working with a recovery an addiction group called Tempest, and teaching them about how to address ableism structurally within the recovery program, but also interpersonally to talk about microaggressions around ableism. And then of course I do sex education on varying levels, from training trainers to talking to children, which is kind of frightening that I talk to children, but I can do all kinds of voices. So naughty to very, very reasonable and nice.
How do you define sexuality, and why do you think it's an important discussion, particularly within the disability community?
Great question. So sexuality is really useful because it encompasses all of the issues that are around the idea of sex. So sex is really, it comes down to our biological chromosomal makeup, and sex is activities, whereas sexuality is our identity around gender, our sexual orientation, our relationship style, what we feel desire about, how we see desire in our bodies. And that's why it's so important to disability, because we are a group of people that have been told by ableism that is saturated in our culture and embedded in our culture in the US to tell us that our bodies are worthless, that our bodies are disposable, particularly now in this COVID epidemic. We are worthless, we're not desirable, we're pitiable. So instead of being these holistic, real people, we're just a diagnosis. And so I think sexuality is actually the nucleus or the center of ableism. And if we could somehow rectify people seeing us as sexual beings, if we could get over this desexualization, it could bring humanity to us. So I see it as a passageway to getting jobs and transportation, because we would be seen as meaningful people and not just objects of despair.
Describe to us a little more about your disability, because we can't really see you except for the lovely clothing and earrings and makeup. But talk a little bit more about your disability and what your experiences have been growing up, having a disability, and people's perceptions of who you are.
Absolutely. So I have osteogenesis imperfecta, which is just brittle bones. I'm short stature. I have a heart-shaped face, which is one of the symptoms. And then the whites of my eyes are slightly blue. And that's another diagnostic feature. So I've had multiple fractures and about 17 surgeries, almost 100 fractures. I've spent a lot of my life in what is like the quarantine. So I've spent a lot of my life healing by myself a lot. So this is stretching my limits socially, but I've been through this a lot. In terms of how my disability impacted my life, I really didn't know about ableism until I reached the age of tween, where we started breaking off into dating. And I was not seen as desirable. And that was when I understood. I didn't know the word ableism at 15, but I knew this is something that I'm outside of because I'm disabled. And that is when internalized ableism hit me. And I had a good probably 6 years from 15 to 21 where I was just filled with self-hatred because I wasn't sexually included. I did have sexual encounters, but I didn't feel desirable as a whole. And so it really, that pain still sticks with me internally. And so when people reach out to me to talk to me about their sexual shame and just issues around their body and not knowing how to dress, because it's taken me so long, part of my OI is having a protruding sternum. So it's like having a larger than my breast, third breast in the middle of my chest. And so learning how to dress that has taken me years. And I had no one training me, to no one teaching me. And, you know, I really suffered in that silence. And then I had an access issue on my campus. I got mad and I wanted to solve it. Like you talked about yourself as a problem solver. I'm more of like the angry one that goes after the problem, but I wanted the problem solved. And then all of a sudden I was told, why don't you go do this disability organization? You seem like you have fervor. So I did it. And then I started doing leadership. I found disability studies. I realized this isn't my body that's the problem. It's society. And I had this mind explosion. And then I started working in disability rights and it just fundamentally changed me. But I realized how much people don't like me talking about sex because I am very aggressive about it. And people do tell me, even people who have written books on sex have said things like employment matter more. And this is frivolous and you shouldn't devote your whole life to it. And I say, well, you know, plenty of people are working on employment or housing, and that those are viable issues, and I'm not discounting them at all. But there are plenty of us that need to work on sex too. We need
Yeah, because I think you're completely correct. How we view ourselves as sexual beings, or whether we view ourselves as sexual beings, which doesn't mean that we're sexually active all the time, but it's whether or not we feel like when we enter a room, people view us as they view other people, not with disdain and not with, oh, we feel so sorry for that person. How do you tell people, what suggestions do you give to people about how to address issues of rejection like you were just discussing? You've written, I think, some very powerful comments about growing up. What are some of your suggestions to our viewers, regardless of their age?
Right. Well, one, with regard to your comment about how not all of us are sexual, it's important to note that some of us are asexual. So some of us don't engage in sexual activity, and that's not an expectation. So you're right. It's all the assumptions that are just so heavy, that burden. But in terms of what I would encourage people to think about with regard to rejection is, one, rejection is part of the game of sex and love for everyone. The majority of people that I teach at a collegiate level, and I've been teaching since 2009, are non-disabled or don't identify as such. And I'm teaching them about sexuality. I'm teaching them how to crypt their sex lives, actually, and how disability can make their sex lives better. But the reality is everybody deals with rejection. That is part of the game. You have to be ready for rejection. This is something that I come up with a lot, that disabled people wonder why they're just getting rejected. And I'm just like, it's a numbers game. You've got to hit on 5 people to maybe get a yes from a one person. And that yes doesn't even mean that you're going to sleep with them. That may mean that you're going to have a conversation that may lead to a phone conversation that may go nowhere. And that's just how it is. I mean, and so knowing that dating is going to entail more no's than yes is really important. So going in with that knowledge, but dealing with rejection, I think what is more useful is maybe talking about how to deal with ableism and deal with self-love, because I think so often we don't even want to look at our bodies or like see ourselves as beautiful. And one thing I hear in the disability communities and the little people communities is some of us don't want to date each other. And I think that's a really good question for people when they're wondering about rejection. Well, what does it mean that I wouldn't even date someone like me? I encourage people as just a body practice to sit or stand or whatever's comfortable in front of a mirror, clothed or naked, whatever is comfortable for you, and figure out things that you love about your body. This is a hard practice for anybody, regardless of disability or age. But I think people need to look at their genitals. They need to look at their bodies. And figure out ways to love themselves and know that rejection is just, it's a numbers game. And you, like, I believe firmly that you're just continuously rolling dice. You're keeping on rolling, and you just, I mean, and it may be timing. You may talk to the person, it's just a bad day. So, you know, you may want to try again, but also boundaries are good. People tell you no, listen and try to move on. So, I mean, it's really what I would tell anybody. But the whole self-love around disability thing, I think that's something our community could do some work in, is really sharing how do we grow to love ourselves, because there were years I couldn't even say I'm disabled without grimacing. And there were years I couldn't look at my body. I would wear baggy clothes, if you can believe it. And I would hide my body because I thought I was hiding my disability.
Well, I'm sorry to say that we are yet again out of time, but we will not reject the comments that you've made. We will put up information about how you can see more of Bethany's work. It's been a privilege for me to get to know you over the years and the contributions that you're making within the disability and non-disability community. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you all for participating. And if you have any comments that you want to make about this interview, we'd appreciate receiving them. Have a good day now.